Hey, it's Mike Hambright with FlipNerd.com. Welcome back for another exciting VIP interview where I interview the most successful real estate investing experts in the country and entrepreneurs in our industry to help you learn and grow. Today, I'm joined by Alex Joungblood, who's a fellow podcaster. He's a real estate investor and a coach. His website is faircashoffer.com, where he buys houses through, and he's an all-around awesome guy. Today, we're going to talk about being a real estate opportunist, and that is not getting hung up on whether you're a wholesaler or a retailer or whether you only keep houses as rentals. It is focusing on doing whatever you need to do with a deal to make money and monetize those deals. So this is actually the same philosophy that I've used for years, and I'm excited that Alex is going to talk about it because we've got a lot in common. So before we get started, though, let's take a moment to recognize our featured sponsors. RealtyMogul.com is an online marketplace for real estate investing, connecting borrowers and capital from accredited and institutional investors. Get a rehab loan fast and close in as little as 10 days. Rates start as low as 9%. We'd also like to thank National Real Estate Insurance Group, the nation's leading provider of insurance to the residential real estate investor market. From individual properties to large-scale investors, National Real Estate Insurance Group is ready to serve you. Please note, the views and opinions expressed by the individuals in this program do not necessarily reflect those of FlipNerd.com or any of its partners, advertisers, or affiliates. Please consult professionals before making any investment or tax decisions, as real estate investing can be risky. Hey, Alex, welcome to the show.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, glad you're here. So, and I've known about you for a long time, on the peripheral because of your Facebook group, the Wholesaling Houses Full-Time group, which is a pretty large group. So we've never actually physically met.
No.
Even at this point, we're on Skype, so we haven't physically met. But before we get started, though, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, how long you've been a real estate investor, and then maybe tell us a little bit about your Facebook group as well.
Sure. Well, I got into real estate or interested in the real estate business in 2004 when I was married in 2003. And interestingly enough, when you're first married, you don't have really any money, and you're in an apartment complex and you don't have any money for cable. So what do you watch? Infomercials, right? So you watch Carlton Sheets and you see some of the other guys out there, whatever, and that kind of, you're sitting in your house. And at the point when I was first married, I didn't have an actual job yet. Even though my wife did, she was actually a private school teacher, and I was still waiting to find what I was going to be able to do to contribute to the marriage.
Yeah.
So at home, I'm watching infomercials and seeing what's going on with that, and kind of I was like, wow, that'd be kind of cool if, I could make something like that happen.
Yeah.
I'm sure my wife would really appreciate that.
Yeah.
So, Carlton Sheets was the first guy I looked at, and Ron LeGrand as well. Mm-hmm. And one of the guys that I was actually going to, the reason I came down this area was to actually go to a further graduate school along the seminary field, believe it or not. And this guy was also in the seminary with me and mentioned that he had some courses from Ron LeGrand. And it was funny. It was kind of like a secretive thing. It was kind of like, hey, I've got these courses. Don't tell anybody. Meet me in the parking lot, and I'll give them to you. So he did. He gave me these. I think it was the for sale by owner course and the wholesaling course and pretty houses course, if you want to call it that.
Yep.
And I started getting into those, and it was funny at the time. I really had no idea what I was looking at. I had no idea what a mortgage was, what a refinance was, what just how you could flip a house that you didn't own, or how you could even monetize it. I'm like, okay, so you find these houses and you find another but how's this whole thing work?
Yeah.
So through reading that and getting moving, I guess you could say, he really helped me along the way. At first, he kind of said, if you have a house, let me know about it and we'll work on it and we'll split the deal. So I kind of went along that way, and and that's pretty standard with what people do.
Right.
Is they'll find somebody and they'll treat them as a bird dog and and kind of bring them under their wing in hopes that they'll find them a deal. So my first deal that I did along those lines was a lease option deal. And he actually brought this deal to me. And it was funny because I don't know if you remember back in the day, what was the site? It was a site that had to do with wholesalers listing their deals, but it was before the times of like Rehab List and stuff like that. It was I think it was one of Ron LeGrand's sites actually, and there was a listing on there that he put. I didn't know he put it there, but of a lease option deal he was looking to assign. It was the tenant was in there already. He put the whole deal together, and I actually, before that got there, I actually went with him to the house and watched him sell the deal to get the tenant in there, you know.
Okay.
And unbeknownst to me, this was that actual deal he was trying to assign to somebody for like $1,500.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that he could step out of it and assign it. So I actually came up with, you know, I didn't have any money really at the time, but I came up with the $1,500 and gave it to him, and he assigned the deal to me. And now, yay, I'm in the real estate business, right?
Right.
So now this deal, the tenant buyer that was in the deal, and if you know anything about lease options and how it works, is basically you get a sandwich lease option. So you get the homeowner to do a lease option with them, but then you bring a tenant buyer and do a lease option with them.
Right.
So you would make the cash flow in between the two payments of the mortgage with the bank and the homeowner between the new tenant that you have. And then also on the resale side of things, right? So if you have it under contract for $70,000, the homeowner, you're going to have it under contract for $85,000 with the new tenant buyer, and that's how you would make your money. I'm thinking $1,500 to make $15,000 sounds pretty good to me.
Yeah.
You know? So this tenant buyer actually turns out was in bankruptcy. So chances are that they're not going to be able to get finance out of this deal, right? And we actually got to the point where this tenant buyer was actually going to buy the house from me. And I think her mom was going to refinance or something and give her the cash to buy the house for herself or something along these lines. But this tenant buyer was very smart because she knew that the lot behind the house, through the chain of title, had not been conveyed the proper way. So she actually went to the closing table ready to buy and walked out after she looked at the legal description on the deed and said, "Oh, this doesn't include the lot behind the house."
Yeah.
And she stayed in the house and did not pay me rent the whole time during this, telling me I had to fix this. This was my problem, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
So long story short, I had to go down the lines of evicting her and getting her out, all along of really not having hardly any money and dealing with this whole thing and going to court. And long story short, the judge split the baby and actually made me give her deposit back, which I had not received any deposit, even though I was, because I was assigned the deal.
Right.
So he took her deposit out of the rent that she owed me. And that was my first real estate deal.
Yeah.
So, and the way I actually got out of that deal was I wholesaled it. I put a newspaper ad in the real estate section for selling properties, and I wholesaled the deal and made like $15,000, from the 70 to the 85 or whatever it was.
Yeah, that's great.
And got out of it, know. So first bumpy experience, and I kind of after that I was kind of like maybe this isn't for me, So I went into the sales arena. I actually started an independent dealership with ADT, the security company.
Yeah.
And did decently well with that, but realized that I built myself another job along with my partner that I had, and really wasn't a fan of that. And in 2008, all along those lines, I was doing some little deals here and there. But in 2008, I realized, man, if I could just put this together and spend all my time doing real estate, maybe I can break away from this and really achieve the freedom that I'm looking for.
Yeah.
So in 2008, I made that split and have been full-time ever since.
Yeah, that's great. What's interesting is, for a lot of new people, and I know you talk to a lot of new people because there's, I'm sure there's a lot of new people. I know there's a lot of new people in your Facebook group, for example, that ask a lot of new people questions, which is fine. Everybody starts there. The learning curve is so high for your first few deals And not like, and you know, I've done hundreds of deals and you've done a lot of deals. You're still learning all the time. You have to always learn. But I think people, just to get over that hurdle is, you know, you've got to give it to people that got over that hurdle and figured it out. Because it can be a steep climb, but
you got to pay your dues.
Yeah.
Along the way, you got to pay.
Yeah, yeah. And so there's so many people that do what you did, and then they never come back. They're like, "Oh, this is how it is." No, I would never do that again. But credit to you for coming back. So that's great.
Yeah. So
awesome.
That's my history.
So tell us a little bit about the Facebook group. I mean, you've got like 11,000 people in your group or something, right? It's turned into a huge group, and it's very active.
It's
so
over 11,000 people.
Yeah.
It's actually a great place where wholesalers and other rehabbers and just people in real estate in general can get together and share what's going on in their business and ask questions and get information and just really get a feel for what it's really like to be in the business from a real non-hypey standpoint. Yeah. Just because you can see everybody talking about what they're doing, a lot of people post deals, a lot of people post checks for motivation.
Yeah.
And there's nothing behind those checks. It's not like, okay, here's my check. By the way, enter your name and email address over here kind of thing, Right. So everybody's just being real. And the reason I started that group, like we had talked about, was because I wanted just a common spot that people could talk about what they're doing in their business without having to tell all the people around them locally, how much money they're making or what their journey is, and just wanted a spot where people could do that with that privacy and with that capability, and it's really taken off.
Yeah, I think a lot of people appreciate us. It's not anonymous because you're tied to your Facebook account, but somewhat, a place where you can, kind of a safe place where you can ask questions and have people chime back in. And I mean, I've seen, some people will look at dozens of people to respond to a question on your page. So
I mean, the cool thing is, it's a great place to share your successes and challenges. But if you've got a question, I mean, there are threads that are 100 comments deep. So there's a lot of interaction and very little spam. I'm pretty big on making sure that gets out quick. That's an issue.
Yeah. Well, so for those that aren't familiar with it, it's it's wholesaling houses full time.
Wholesaling house is full time.
Yeah,
yes.
It's a private
Just go
group,
to Facebook, search for it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a private group, so you have to request access to it. But unless you're part of the riffraff, Alex will probably let you in, right?
That's right.
So, hey, we're going to talk about just kind of being an opportunist today, and it's the same philosophy that I've always had. People say, "Do you primarily wholesale? Do you do this? Do you do that?" And my answer has always been, I let the deal dictate what I'm going to do with it. And I think, there's a challenge with new people having kind of too many tools in their tool chest to get too creative, because that can really bog you down if you don't know how to do all those things. So there's some of it is being, getting some experience and learning how to do lease options and other things that people do if that's not what you primarily do. But I think, we have the same philosophy in that it's important to find different ways to monetize a deal, which allow you to do more deals and therefore make more money.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, and I go back to Ron LeGrand again. You have to become a transaction engineer, is what he says.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about just your general philosophy on being an opportunist.
Sure.
And finding any way you can to monetize deals.
Yeah, I mean, the main thing is a lot of people get into the business and they think, I'm going to be a wholesaler. That's what I want to do. I want to be a wholesaler. I want to flip deals. I want to sign contracts. And I find that can be a very limiting thing. You can limit yourself greatly because there's a lot more opportunities out there. And one of the examples that we've talked about before is, let's say, for instance, in a land development situation, a deal that you can buy and maybe only assign for $5,000 or $10,000 could really be worth $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 if you're able to monetize it from the standpoint of putting a new construction house there, or putting putting 4 new construction houses there. Yeah. And I mean, then it becomes even bigger. Now we're talking $250,000, $300,000. if you're able to put those people in place and make that work. Now, that's a pretty advanced example of it, but that's a pretty good example because you're really losing out on that money if you can't put that together. And to be honest, I don't really know much about new construction and development. I know people that know things about that, and if you align yourself with the right people, then you put yourself in that position to be able to have success with that.
Yeah.
A more simple example, I would say, would be from a wholetailing standpoint. And you and I talked about that as well. Right. Wholetailing is when you are taking a wholesale deal and pretty much retailing it. So it's a combination of wholesale and retail. And to do that, all you need to be able to have access to is just maybe a little bit of capital. Maybe, and you said, what would you say an average purchase price for you is that you'd be able to wholesale something?
You know, so I'm in the Dallas market. I really like, I'll tell you a little bit more about some of the wholesale stuff that I do, but I really like the first-time home buyer space because I feel that people they'll value the repairs differently than I do. Because I have to pay somebody to do everything. They may be looking at it as, hey, it's a year of weekend projects, you know, and lots of beer and pizza for my buddies. And I'm thinking, hey, the texture's $1 a square foot. I'm going to have to put down baseboard, and it's this much per foot. I'm just calculating everything because I'm not going to lift a hammer. I don't do anything. But a lot of folks are, you know, when I see wallpaper that has to be peeled, I'm thinking, okay, it's $1 a foot to peel it. Then I'm going to have to texture it. Then I'm going to have to paint it. And people don't see it that way. They're like, oh, that's going to suck to pull that off. But they don't consider their opportunity cost.
Absolutely.
A lot of first-time home buyers. But I get it. It's the same people that are maybe changing their own oil and maybe cutting their own hair, things that I also don't do. But you know, there was a time when I was young and didn't have a lot of money, and I did more things that I don't do myself now. But there's a market for that. So I think, you know, if you could find, like you said, if you could find ways to find a buyer that's willing to pay more than a traditionally trained real estate investor, that's where you could make a bigger spread.
Absolutely. And there's other ways to do it without capital. You've got to be careful, you know, check with your real estate professionals, check with your attorneys and all that type of thing. But you can list a property as contract owner if you're able to do that in your market. Yeah. So without taking a deal down per se and closing it, you can list a property on MLS as contract owner, disclosing that, and you can wholesale in that sense.
Yeah.
My first big wholesale that I did was a probate deal, actually. I bought a deal for $80,000, and the house was actually just dated. It was in good shape, but it was dated. And I walked through it, and I was looking, and I was like, okay, if we have to redesign this kitchen. And it was kind of interesting because the kitchen, like, didn't have many cabinets. It was like, it had like countertops set on top of bricks in almost like an L shape. I don't know. It's kind of weird.
Sounds
and I'm
beautiful.
thinking, wow, it's going to be very expensive to rip all this out and then put a new kitchen in, right?
Yeah.
But the carpets were good. The bathrooms were dated but good. And there was a lot of nice little things to it, I guess you could say. But when I ran the numbers and I said, okay, to do my normal rehab on this thing, I'm going to spend $40,000, $50,000 probably, because, you know, when you get into a house and you start removing things, it's kind of like, where do you stop? You just keep doing. You might as well just go the whole way with it. But I looked at it and I said, okay, I'll do this project. It's going to take me probably 60 to 90 days, you know, the normal rehab situation, and all this extra money to do it. And I probably might end up making $10,000 to $15,000 more than if I were to list this and as is for a big discounted price, you know, because I could have. And here's the interesting thing: the sweet spot is trying to find that spread, that right spread between how, you know, because if I was to retail it after doing all this work, I could probably got 205, 210 maybe, right? However, I listed it for $149.9, right? So anybody who's going out into that market looking for a brand new rehabbed house, they're going to be up in that low 200s number.
Right.
But if I'm at 149.9, now I'm making, or was it 144.9? I can't remember. You're in a spot now where you're making it a lot more affordable for somebody. And if it's livable, they can get in there and do what they want to do. And that's what I did. I listed it for 80. I actually closed on it, and we sold it for 144 or 149, whatever it was. And it didn't take long. It was like 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think, my philosophy or my belief has always been that, especially if you're in a good, so there's a couple of opportunities. One is going after the first time home buyer that values sweat equity. They're willing to do the work if it saves them money.
Right.
There's an opportunity there. There's an opportunity for people that want to get into a nice neighborhood, but they can't quite afford it. And so, like you said, if it's livable, I think the other thing you got to consider is, can they get a loan on the house? You really got to consider, can they get an FHA loan on a house, especially if it's at a lower price point? That's primarily who you're going to attract as an FHA buyer. So if the house has foundation problems or a leaking roof or those things, you're not going to be able to. They're not going to be able to get financing on it. So, so the question is and knowing a number of appraisers, I know that they don't discount. They don't look at wallpaper and say that's going to be $250 a foot to peel it, retexture it, and paint it. They just say, it's kind of dated. I'm gonna knock off $1,000 for the whole house because it's got a lot of wallpaper. I see a house full of wallpaper as, $6,000-8,000 of peeling it, retexturing, and painting, and they just don't knock that much value off. And so I think people start to, I give an analogy of, some people probably heard this before, of I'm kind of a sucker for a deal. I'm trying to change this mentality. But, sometimes I'll go into a clothing store and I'm like, oh, there's the clearance section. I go over there. And next thing you know, I've got a shirt that it's like, it's not quite the color I want. It's a little bit tight, but hey, I'm about to lose some weight anyway. And, you just find a way to justify it's half price. I got a really good deal. And then it hangs in my closet for like 2 years with the tag still on it. And I get rid of it. And of course, it was a terrible deal then. But I think there's people that do that with a house. They say, wow, normally this would be $200, but for $150, yeah, it needs a little bit of work. But it'll allow us to get in. It'll allow us to do it the way we want to do. And they justify the value of that deal and maybe overlook some things that you and I don't look past if we're going to have to retail it because we're going to have to take care of those things.
Oh, absolutely. And like you said about FHA and financing, that's a huge part of that wholesaling game.
Yeah.
Is making sure you understand that financing on the back end. Here in Virginia, we have a lot of VA. We have VA financing, and we love VA financing because there's no seasoning. So that means now I can sell a house literally tomorrow after I buy it, just as long as it meets appraisal guidelines.
Yeah, that's great.
And on that house, they did make me not the home inspector didn't, but the appraiser came on out after and made me replace the roof on the house.
Yeah, that's one challenge I've had with VA loans is they tend to be a little more strenuous on lender required repairs.
Right. And and that's fine. Yeah. The homeowners get a new roof and it satisfied the situation, and I could still sell the house very, very quickly. So VA is a good loan. FHA. Now, there used to be that 90-day flipping clause in there type of thing. However, you can still get past that as long as you have 2 decent appraisals. Have you had any experience with that?
Yeah, they typically still so we usually have, they usually require 2 appraisals. And here's a tip for everybody that you're listening. I never pay for the second appraisal. They'll come to you and they'll say that the buyer, per FHA, the guideline, the buyer can't pay for 2 appraisals. But it doesn't say that the seller has to. But usually their agent will come to you and say, oh, the buyer can't pay for it, so you have to. And I usually say, well, why don't you pay for it? Or what? We didn't require that they use FHA, and we didn't require that they choose that lender. So how about that lender pays for it? So we just, in fact, what we do with every FHA deal that we sell is the day after. This is a tip that I usually don't tell people that are. I don't normally share this tip on my podcast. Today. So on the day after the financing, on the day after the option period ends, so if they have like a 10-day option period where they're going to do inspections and things, so once that's passed, we have a canned letter that we send to the lender that says, thanks for financing this person. By the way, I just want you to know that we're real estate investors and we buy houses at a deep discount that has nothing to do with the value of the house now. Kind of here's why we buy them. Usually the person was in a distressed situation or the house needed a lot of work. But I've attached a copy of all of our receipts, and we did $30,000 worth of work. And in the instance that you require a second appraisal, just want you to know that it's our policy that we don't pay for that one, because we didn't choose that the buyer use FHA, and we didn't choose that the buyer use you as a lender. And so
did you just say for after doing $30,000 worth of work? So this is one you worked on, or?
Yeah, these are ones that we rehabbed. Yeah, so we'll tell them if we did when we rehab them. We tend, we buy a lot. We buy a lot of pretty distressed houses, so we tend to do a lot of work when we do a full retail on them. And so we'll just tell them, like, this is how much we spent, and here's all of our receipts, and this is how we're justifying our price. Not that we should have to justify our price, because we have a willing buyer and a willing seller, but you know how lenders are. So we basically just say, hey, it's not our problem. Because before we did that, we would be 2 days before closing, and they would say, oh, we didn't know that you're flipping the house. Like, we didn't know that you're selling it for a lot more than you bought it for. And it's like, yeah, but look at all the risk we took, and look at all we put into it. And, we find ourselves trying to justify our profits or all of our risk or whatever. And it's like, well, I shouldn't have to justify it. But now, instead of waiting for it to happen, which it almost always happens, we're just upfront about it, and we say,
just head it right off.
Here's the deal. Because then we never get somebody that comes back 2 days before and say, oh, we need a second appraisal because you were flipping it. It's like, no, we told you that 3 weeks ago. And we don't have as many problems as we used to just by being more upfront with it. But
usually being honest and upfront helps in a lot of situations.
It's not that we were ever being dishonest, but we're just more forward on, any guidelines that we may have. One of the biggest problems that we have with lenders typically is not so much what the FHA guideline is, but that individual lender has its own guidelines, because they're just trying to package these things and sell them off. So they would usually have some extra requirements that are in there that are sometimes a burden. But so financing is a big thing when you're dealing with the wholesale situation, and that's you got to learn how to deal with the different people, the different lenders, your VA, FHA, USDA. Have you ever seen a loan by them? I know they exist. I mean, I'm in a heavily populated area, so we don't really do. Yeah. I don't recall doing. We may have done a couple.
I've done a few of those,
but yeah. So, kind of in the vein of being an opportunist, I think the general discussion is, hey, if you're just wholesaling everything, and if you're just always going to wholesale, you might be leaving some money on the table. In fact, there's probably deals that you can't even do that you could otherwise, because you always have to think about how much spread can I have and still leave enough meat on the bones for the next guy.
Right.
So, I guess kind of a hypothetical example is if people in your market are only buying at 70% of ARV, less repairs, and this person's payoff is 72%, and they're willing to walk away with nothing, but you've got to pay 72%. If you can't find another wholesaler in your market to pay more than that for it, then you would typically walk away from that deal. Whereas if you could retail it or even wholesale it like we're talking about, then it opens. Then you could sell it at 100% of ARV, and it opens up another opportunity for you to make money there.
Well, it comes down to marketing too, and your ROI on your marketing, right? Because we spend so much money on marketing out there with postcards and internet and driving traffic to websites in order to get people to say, "Yeah, I want to sell my house." And if you're able to crack that market, so to speak, now your cost per lead or your cost per deal goes down, because now you're maximizing that. And that's huge. You're getting more bang for your buck on your marketing. If you're spending $1,500 to make a deal happen, now maybe it's $750. And again, that's something you can scale better as well. You'll know, okay, if I got to spend this much in marketing to make this much on a deal, then you can better plan for that too. So that's huge too.
Yep. So I think just a general kind of overview of people that are newer typically trying to pigeonhole themselves into I'm a wholesaler, or I just want to keep houses as rentals, or different things. And I guess what we're saying here is, from two experienced guys, is that it's important to open yourself up to whatever it takes to monetize a deal, using some different strategies, maybe doing some partnerships and other things. And any other kind of comments on how to make sure people are monetizing everything they can, Alex?
Well, It comes down to making sure you're prepared to do that. So private money is one of those things that that really opens you up to that. Once I realized the power of private money and started using that in my business, that really was a turning point for me, because now I could buy something and not have to worry about the ticking time clock of the contract, and oh man, I can't sell this. Now what am I going to do?
Right.
Type of thing. Or I'm just going to have to sell this for $2,000 assignment fee or a $5,000 assignment fee. You got to be prepared to do that, and private money is a big part of that. So,
yeah, and I'd say for wholesalers, I think one of the problems that a lot of new wholesalers tend to have is that they pigeonhole themselves into, I'm just going to wholesale or assign property so I don't need capital. And then when a deal comes up where they wish they had capital, they already had the mentality of, well, I haven't been looking for it because I didn't need it. So you should always have some access there built up, or relationships in case you need it.
And one thing you could do as well is, if you don't have access to private money, you could find somebody in your local market, an investor that that does, and they might want to partner with you on it to go halvesies on it, and you still might make more money that way than just selling it real quick to somebody because you couldn't sell it, so you had to sell it real cheap or not be able to sell it at all.
Right.
So, and until you're able to establish those relationships.
Yep. Great. Well, if you're newer and you're listening, we should check out Wholesaling Houses Full Time, Alex's private Facebook group. It's a great learning platform. There's a lot of information shared out there, a lot of questions, and lots of people willing to share their knowledge and stuff. So it's great. Well, hey, Alex, any final words for folks that are listening to the show about either being an opportunist and monetizing all the deals they can, or just general success? Anything you want to share?
Yeah, just open your eyes to what you have going. Really look at your leads that you have coming in. First of all, you've got to have leads coming in. That's the first thing. You've got to get good at marketing. You've got to have as many leads as you can coming into the pipe, and then start looking at them not just in the standpoint of, okay, this person is not asking the right price, so I'm just going to write them off right away. First check if they've got equity. If they've got equity, go for the lowball price if you need to. But if they won't do that, don't write it off completely. Check, maybe it's worth exploring a little further. Get out there, look at the house, and see if it is really in decent shape. And maybe you can beat your competition out on it because you can offer a little bit more for it, and also still end up making some good money on it because you can do that wholesale strategy. So it comes back to being able to examine your leads and make sure that you know what you're working with. And that's a big part of it. And then when it comes to development and things like that, and you're able to put yourself in a position where you can work with people that can help you along those lines, that's going to open up a whole nother category of things that you can do. And it all comes back to knowing your leads and knowing your options. So don't just call yourself a wholesaler or a flipper. Be an opportunist and realize there's so many different ways we can go with leads and ways we can make money.
Absolutely. Well, hey, Alex, thanks for joining us today. I appreciate all your time and knowledge.
Thank you.
All right, buddy. We'll see you around. Are you a member of FlipNerd.com, the most robust real estate investing platform in existence, where you can find off-market wholesale deals and great vendors literally in your market? You can get access to advice from experts and learn about local clubs and events right in your backyard. If not, please visit FlipNerd.com and register for a free account. You can register in less than a minute. It's pretty much the coolest site that's ever existed in the real estate investing industry, so get on over to FlipNerd.com.